I never imagined that a simple lunch, one I almost didn't eat myself, would become the turning point of my entire career. It wasn't planned, calculated, or even intentional. It was just one of those fleeting human gestures you make without expecting anything in return. But life has a strange way of taking ordinary moments and turning them into the start of something extraordinary. Or devastating, depending on which side you're on. That morning started like every other, with me walking into the glass tower of Hallstrom Capital, clutching my half-worn coffee cup like it was armor. Inside those walls, kindness was currency you couldn't afford to spend. People smiled with their mouths but measured every word like it could be used against them. And sitting at the top of that hierarchy of fear was my boss, Claire Donovan. Claire had a reputation. To outsiders, she was disciplined and results-driven. But to those of us working under her, she was a storm disguised in silk. Her voice could slice through a meeting room faster than any blade. Her praise was as rare as a snowstorm in July, and her favorite hobby was reminding people how replaceable they were. That morning, she called me into her office before I'd even had a chance to turn on my computer. The tone in her voice made the entire floor go quiet. Everyone knew what that meant. Someone was about to be humiliated. "Close the door, Mia," she said, without looking up from her monitor. I obeyed. My stomach tightened. She finally glanced up, her expression sharp, perfectly calculated. "I looked at your numbers from the Ranix account. Tell me, why do I pay you 6 figures if I have to fix your mistakes myself?" Her voice was cold, but her words were designed to burn. I opened my mouth to explain that the client had changed the data set overnight, but she cut me off mid-sentence. "Excuses," she said. "You're always full of them. You think being nice to people makes up for being incompetent?" I didn't respond. You couldn't win an argument with her. She'd twist your logic until you looked guilty of something you hadn't even done. I left her office feeling smaller than when I entered, my self-worth chipped away one word at a time. By noon, I had no appetite left. I walked to the break room, carrying my homemade lunch, pasta salad, packed in a worn glass container. It wasn't fancy, but it reminded me of simpler days. My mom's cooking, laughter at the dinner table, a world far from polished floors and designer cruelty. The room was empty. I sat down, opened my lunch, and stared at it, lost in thought. My reflection stared back from the stainless steel counter. Tired eyes. Forced smile. That's when the door opened. A man walked in, older, maybe mid-50s, with gray streaks in his hair and a calm presence that didn't fit this place. He wore a plain shirt, no tie, no badge, just a quiet confidence. I assumed he was from another department, maybe IT or compliance. He carried a small brown bag, looking confused as he scanned the empty vending machine. He turned to me, almost embarrassed. "They said there's a cafeteria here somewhere, but I think I'm lost." His tone was warm, unpretentious. I smiled faintly, motioning toward the elevator. "You'll need to go down 2 floors. It's decent if you like overpriced sandwiches." He laughed softly. "Guess I'll survive, though I skipped breakfast, and I've got meetings all day. Rookie mistake." I hesitated for a second, then glanced at my untouched lunch. "You can have this if you want. It's just pasta, but it's good." He blinked in surprise. "Are you sure? That's very kind of you." "Yeah," I said, pushing it toward him. I could use an excuse to stretch my legs anyway. He accepted it gently, almost with disbelief. "Thank you. Not many people around here do something like that." "Guess I didn't get the memo?" I joked. He chuckled, studying me for a moment. "You're different. I can tell." He left soon after, thanking me again before disappearing into the elevator. I didn't think much of it. Just another face I'd probably never see again. That afternoon, Claire called another meeting. She was in one of her moods, the kind where she'd rip through people's work line by line, not because it was wrong, but because she enjoyed watching them squirm. I sat through it, pretending not to exist. But something strange happened around 4 p.m. HR came by and whispered something to Claire. Her face changed, not the usual anger, but confusion. Then panic. Within minutes, she stood up abruptly and left the room. No explanation. The team exchanged puzzled looks. No one knew what was going on. By evening, rumors started swirling. Something about a surprise executive visit, an audit, and a confidential report. I didn't connect any of it to the stranger from the break room. Not yet. But deep down, something told me the tides had just started to turn, and it all began with a simple act of kindness. A lunch I never got to eat. The next morning, the entire office buzzed like a shaken beehive. People whispered in corners, messages flew across Slack, and every time the elevator chimed, heads turned. Something was happening. Something big. And in a place like Hallstrom Capital, big usually meant dangerous. Claire wasn't in her office. That alone was strange. She was always the first to arrive, eager to establish dominance before anyone else had their first coffee. But her glass door stayed shut, lights off, blinds drawn. I tried to focus on my work, but curiosity clawed at me. I could hear fragments of conversations. Unexpected visit. Compliance audit. CEO himself. The words didn't quite fit together. The CEO never came down to our floor. Our division, portfolio risk, was important, but not that important. We were the invisible gears that made the machine run, not the face of the company. By noon, everyone knew something had shifted. Claire finally arrived, but not her usual self. She looked pale, jittery. Her voice, normally razor-sharp, carried a faint tremor as she barked orders. "Mia, get the report from last quarter." "Now," she snapped. I stood up, nodding, keeping my face blank. But when I handed it over, I noticed her hands were shaking. She avoided eye contact, and that alone was a red flag. Claire never looked away first. A few minutes later, a voice echoed down the hallway. Calm, deep, confident. "Good afternoon, everyone. Please continue with your work." The sound froze me mid-step. It was him, the man from the break room, the one who'd eaten my pasta. He walked in flanked by 2 senior executives, his presence commanding yet gentle. Every head lifted as if gravity itself had shifted. I realized then, he wasn't from another department. He was Thomas Grant, the CEO of Hallstrom Capital, the man whose name was on the letterhead, the one we only saw in press releases and investor calls, the man I had given my lunch to. He met my eyes briefly as he passed. For a second, a small, knowing smile touched his lips, not smug but warm. Recognition. Gratitude. My heart raced. I wasn't sure whether to feel embarrassed or terrified. Claire immediately switched tones, her voice sugar-sweet as she greeted him. "Mr. Grant, what a pleasant surprise. We weren't expecting—" He raised a hand politely. "Spare me the pleasantries, Ms. Donovan. I'm here because of a report that crossed my desk last night." The room went silent. Claire blinked rapidly, trying to regain composure. "Of course. If there's anything I can clarify..." "Let's start with your department's turnover rate," he said evenly. "It's the highest in the company. 5 resignations in 4 months. Why?" I saw her mask crack, just for a second. "Well, you know how the market is. Some people can't handle the pressure." "Pressure," he repeated slowly, as if testing the word. "Or management?" No one breathed. He turned slightly, his gaze sweeping across the room, calm, steady, assessing. "I'll be sitting in today. Don't mind me." Then he walked toward the far end of the floor, directly past my desk. As he passed, he said softly, so low only I could hear, "Good to see you again, Mia." My throat tightened. "You remember?" He gave a faint smile. "Some gestures you don't forget." Then he moved on, leaving me stunned in his wake. The rest of the day unfolded like a quiet storm. Claire tried to act composed, but the cracks showed. Every question from Mr. Grant seemed to land with surgical precision. Data inconsistencies, expense reports, questionable client handling. Things only someone on the inside would know to look for. And I realized something chilling. He already knew. Whatever brought him here wasn't random. My lunch had been coincidence, or maybe fate. But the investigation, that was deliberate. Someone had tipped him off, and somehow I was right in the middle of it. That evening, as I packed my things, he stopped by my desk again. "Walk with me," he said quietly. We stepped into the empty corridor, the air thick with fluorescent hum. "I owe you more than lunch," he said, hands in his pockets. "I owe you honesty. I've been reviewing complaints filed anonymously from this department. Your name appeared in several of them, not as the complainant, but as a witness. Someone who saw what others went through. I froze. I had no idea anyone had used my name. I had tried so hard to stay invisible. He continued, "We're not just looking at numbers anymore, Mia. We're looking at behavior. And Ms. Donovan has a lot to answer for." Before I could respond, he added gently, "I'd like you to assist me, quietly, off the record." My pulse raced. "Assist you? How?" He smiled faintly. "By simply being who you already are. The one person around here who still has integrity." That night, as I left the building, I looked back through the glass walls of Hallstrom Capital, at the empire that once made me feel small. Something told me that was about to change. The next few days felt like walking through fog. Every conversation ended the moment I walked into a room. Every smile was suddenly too polite, too rehearsed. Claire's voice, once booming across the floor, had softened to something sharp but careful. The kind of tone predators use when they know they're being watched. Word had spread that the CEO was conducting a culture audit. That was the polite term. In reality, it was a quiet investigation, one that made everyone nervous, especially the guilty. Claire started changing tactics. She'd stop by my desk more often, pretending to be friendly. "How are you holding up, Mia?" she asked one afternoon, her smile tight as a wire. "I know things have been tense lately." I forced a neutral expression. "I'm fine, thank you." "That's good," she said, leaning closer. "You've always been so loyal. I hope you know how much I value that." Her perfume was overwhelming. The same one that used to linger in my nightmares after late-night scoldings. I could feel her searching my eyes, trying to read whether I was the leak. After she left, a coworker I trusted, Nina, slid over to my desk. "She's scared," she whispered. "I've never seen her like this." "She should be," I said quietly. Still, I couldn't relax. I wasn't sure who knew about my conversations with Mr. Grant. We only met after hours, in his temporary office on the executive floor. I'd bring him internal reports, email threads, and examples of Claire's manipulation. Things no one else dared document. One night, he looked at me seriously and said, "You understand what this means, right? Once this comes out, there's no going back." "I know," I said, "but it has to end." The deeper we went, the more horrifying it became. Claire had buried employee complaints, redirected client bonuses into her own performance pool, and falsified overtime records to make her department look more efficient. She had built her empire on silence, and now, the silence was breaking, but she wasn't going down quietly. A few mornings later, my inbox exploded with messages, urgent, HR meeting. I walked in to find Claire already there, sitting beside an HR rep, her face calm, but eyes gleaming with something dangerous. "Mia," she began sweetly, "we received an anonymous report about you sharing confidential information with external parties." I froze. She continued, "It's a serious allegation. I'd hate to believe it's true." I could see her enjoying every second of it, her last desperate attempt to turn the tables before the truth crushed her. The HR rep looked uncomfortable. "We just need to verify a few things." Before I could defend myself, a voice interrupted from the doorway. "Smooth, steady, unmistakable. That won't be necessary," Mr. Grant said, stepping inside. "I already reviewed the situation personally." Claire's expression faltered for the first time. He turned to me. "Mia, thank you for your patience. Please head back to your desk. I'll handle this from here." I nodded silently, my heart thundering. As I left the room, I caught one last glimpse of Claire. The color had drained from her face, and for once, she didn't have a single word to say. Something told me her empire was seconds away from collapse. The calm didn't last. By the next morning, the office felt colder, as if the air itself was waiting for something to happen. Claire wasn't seen all day after that meeting with Mr. Grant, but her presence lingered like static in the air. People whispered about suspension, about the board's involvement, about documents being pulled from her server. For a few hours, I allowed myself to breathe. I even smiled for the first time in weeks. But I should have known better. People like Claire don't fall quietly. They make sure someone else bleeds on their way down. That afternoon, I received an email marked "Confidential, Immediate Attention." It was from legal. My stomach dropped. When I entered the conference room, 2 corporate attorneys sat waiting. Their expressions were unreadable. "Ms. Rivers," one began, "we need to discuss an issue concerning data security and your recent access history." My pulse quickened. Access history? He turned his laptop toward me. There it was. A report showing files under Claire's name opened from my login ID. Files tied to offshore client accounts. Sensitive, restricted material. I didn't open those, I said immediately. The second attorney exchanged a look with the first. "Then you should know someone used your credentials late last night." My mind spun. My account was password protected. My computer stayed locked when I left. Then it hit me. Claire. She still had admin access from when she monitored my reports. She must have planted this. I tried to explain, but they stopped me. "We're not accusing you. Yet. But the situation is serious." That word, "yet," echoed in my head long after I left. By evening, the whispers returned. People avoided eye contact. Nina tried to reassure me, but I saw the fear in her eyes too. Claire had struck back, twisting the truth before it could destroy her. At 7 p.m., my phone buzzed. "Unknown number." "Don't go home yet," Mr. Grant's voice said quietly. "Meet me in the atrium. Now." I rushed downstairs, heart pounding. He was already there, standing by the window overlooking the city. The same calm expression, but his eyes looked tired. "She planted evidence," I said before he could speak. "I know," he replied. "It traced the logins. She used your credentials remotely, but," he paused, his jaw tightening, "she's gone further than that." He handed me a printed email, an internal message Claire had circulated to select executives. It accused me of manipulating financial data and leaking information to a competitor. My name was underlined. "She's trying to frame you as the whistleblower," he said, "to make the real investigation look personal." For a second, I couldn't breathe. Everything I'd worked for, my reputation, my career, dangled by a thread. "Will they believe her?" I whispered. "Not for long," he said, his voice low and steady. "But we need proof, and we need it soon." He leaned closer, his words deliberate. "If she wants a war, we'll give her one. In daylight, with every record she tried to bury." I nodded slowly. The fear began to fade, replaced by something else. A calm, focused anger. She wanted to destroy me to save herself. She had no idea she'd just taught me exactly how to destroy her. That night, as I left the office for the last train home, I looked at my reflection in the glass doors. Tired eyes, clenched jaw, but something new burning behind them. This wasn't fear anymore. This was the beginning of revenge. Once the panic faded, the plan began to form, not out of spite, but out of cold, necessary logic. If Claire wanted to play dirty, she'd picked the wrong opponent. I had spent years learning how Hallstrom moved, which inboxes accepted signatures, how expense approvals looped through middle managers, the small backdoors in reporting that only someone who'd lived inside the machine could smell. I knew where the truth hid. Now I had to make the truth visible, and impossible to ignore. First, I stopped pretending to be afraid. My emails became faster, more precise. I volunteered for tasks that put me near the system she controlled. When I'd asked to shadow an access audit, I offered to help, on paper, as a collaborator. In reality, as an investigator. Mr. Grant had given me a mandate: gather evidence quietly. I treated it like wartime intelligence. Every thread, every timestamp, every odd file name became a clue. I mapped Claire's patterns. She liked to fix problems at night when no one was watching. She forwarded sensitive documents to a private server under the guise of archiving. She trusted her phone more than her password. Most importantly, she trusted habit. And habits are predictable. The trap had to be surgical. I couldn't rely on accusations. I needed a confession she would make herself. So I engineered situations that would force her hand. Step 1. Bait. I created a controlled error in a client report. A tiny, plausible discrepancy. Only someone with access to the offshore cash would notice. Then I leaked a rumor, carefully and anonymously, that a big investor was asking for a compliance deep dive. Claire's reflex was to cover her tracks. I watched from the quiet of my desk as she logged into the archive under my credentials to clean things up. It captured the session. The timestamps were gold. Step 2. Corroboration. I pulled audit trails, expense reports, and internal chat logs. I found the bonuses rerouted into a shell vendor she'd used before, invoices with familiar handwriting, and a string of expense approvals that matched a late-night coffee shop where she met a contractor. I saved copies, encrypted them, and duplicated them to an external drive Mr. Grant kept in escrow. Legal had to be able to open the files without question. Step 3. Psychology. People like Claire crumble when the narrative flips. She'd always used fear to control the room. I flipped the script by seeding a single fact with 3 trusted colleagues: that the board was already reviewing a timeline of her transactions. Once fear took root, she began to accelerate. She sent more messages, made more mistakes, and reached out to allies who then left digital traces. Panic made her sloppy, exactly what I needed. Finally, the setup for the stage. I arranged, with Mr. Grant's quiet approval, for a routine leadership review to be scheduled at a time when Claire would attempt a final cleanup. The room would be full of board members, legal, and IT. I would be there as a witness, officially presenting a benign reconciliation report. What they wouldn't expect was the folder I slipped into the deck. A clean, chronological file that tied every irregularity directly to Claire. Emails, server logs, bank routing references, all in one place, annotated and time-stamped. As the day approached, I felt a strange calm. Revenge had never been about noise for me. It was about precision. Every late-night log, every forwarded invoice, every suspicious vendor name had a place on the map. I'd become an archivist of her arrogance. There was one risk left: human unpredictability. Claire could double down, accuse me again, or try to disappear. But I'd already accounted for that. Copies of the dossier were encrypted with multiple custodians. Even if she vanished, the paper trail would follow. The trap was set. The pieces were arranged like pieces on a chessboard, each move designed to leave her no safe square. I slept like someone who had finally remembered how to breathe. When I walked into the boardroom that morning, the light looked different, cleaner somehow, as if the glass itself had decided to tell the truth. I carried the reconciliation report under my arm, and the dossier locked behind a corporate firewall, my heartbeat steady. This was the moment the machine either admitted its rot, or kept spinning on a lie. Either way, there would be no hiding after this. The day felt electric, like the whole building was holding its breath. I woke early, my hands steady for the first time in weeks. There was no frantic pacing, no second guessing. The plan had teeth, and now it was time to let it bite. The boardroom was a cathedral of glass and leather. Sunlight sliced through the blinds, throwing bars across polished wood. Around the long table sat faces I'd only ever seen on quarterly calls, each one a judge without a gavel. Legal, IT, HR, and 2 members of the audit committee were there. At the head of the table, Mr. Grant, composed, unreadable. Claire arrived last, late by design, her posture brittle with forced control. She smiled at first, a practiced blade, but her eyes darted, hunting for allies. There were none. I carried the reconciliation report like a simple document, because that's what it was to them. Harmless. They expected numbers, figures, explanations. No one expected confession in neat chronological order, with fingerprints and metadata, and late-night access logs that matched a mobile IP address traced to a cafe Claire frequented. The meeting began with small talk that felt thin, then slid into motion. Mr. Grant asked for the first update. Claire opened her mouth, then paused when the IT director cleared his throat and projected the first slide. A timeline. It started innocent. Payroll runs, expense approvals, and then it threaded into anomalies. Each anomaly had a timestamp, and each timestamp had a trail. IP handoffs, invoice numbers, banking routes. The room leaned forward as if they could see the trail themselves. When Ike played the screen capture of a login session, Claire's credentials accessed via my user ID, mouse movements deleting entries. The air shifted. It was a silent movie of someone cleaning a crime scene. The capture ended with a message typed into the chat. Patch applied. Clean. Claire's face, in high definition on the monitor, showed a flicker of panic I'd never seen in person. She tried to speak. Her voice was small. That's not... Mr. Grant raised a hand. Let me show you something else. He clicked, and the projector displayed emails sent from Claire's corporate account to the shell vendor. Invoices, coffee receipts, a message chain where she discussed redistributing bonuses and moving funds to a safety pool. The language was clinical, almost bored. The board members exchanged looks. One of them, the one who'd always asked tough questions on earnings calls, tapped his pen deliberately and said, "Explain." Claire's mask slipped entirely. She grasped at explanations, confused forwarding rules, unauthorized access, a setup. Her voice rose, then faltered. "I was trying to protect the team," she lied. But the server logs told a different story. Approvals routed through her personal contractor, expense reimbursements with memos that matched her handwriting, and a small, repeated pattern of transfers timed to payroll runs. Legal unfolded a file I had prepared. It was the dossier, clean, annotated, time-stamped. One by one, I presented the pieces. The offshore cash Claire tried to hide, the vendor accounts, the emails, the captured login sessions that showed her using my ID. I kept my voice even. I let the evidence speak louder than any plea. Then came the final blow. I had requested a secure forensic snapshot of the contractor's bank account. When the auditor displayed the beneficiary chain, it ended at a trust account registered in a shell company carrying Claire's initials. The room exhaled as if someone had opened a long-held window. She stood up, not to argue, but to flee. Her composure fractured. For a breath, I saw the woman who had weaponized fear now weaponless. She tried to redirect, to claim corporate loopholes. But each defense was stopped by another timestamp, another call log, another invoice that tied her directly to the transactions. When the chair of the board spoke, his voice was steady and final. "We will be convening a full investigation. Effective immediately, Ms. Donovan is suspended pending review." The words landed like a verdict. Claire slumped into her chair, the color gone from her face. She looked at me once, eyes wide, and for a moment there was something like recognition. Not of me, but of the fact that she had miscalculated who would expose her. After the meeting, people filed out in a slow, stunned silence. I felt the buzz of adrenaline fade, replaced by a hollow kind of relief. Mr. Grant caught my eye as the room emptied. He walked over and with no audience said quietly, "You did well." I nodded, but I didn't smile. There was no celebration in that moment, just the long, slow unspooling of consequences. The collapse was not cinematic in the way stories promise. No dramatic gavel, no triumphant music. It was a series of small, exacting removals. Access revoked, vendor accounts frozen, legal holds placed. But for the first time since this began, I felt the weight on my chest lift. The board had seen the evidence, and the machine had decided to act. As I left the boardroom, the city spread beneath the glass like so many lives. For a moment I thought of my mother's kitchen, of the simple lunch I'd shared. A single gesture had threaded through to this moment. Humble, accidental, significant. The boardroom had collapsed not with a shout, but with the crisp rustle of paper and the cold light of truth. The days that followed felt like slow motion. Claire's world started collapsing from the top down. HR launched an internal review, which was just a polite term for an interrogation. The board froze her access, and suddenly she wasn't barking orders. She was begging for explanations. I stayed quiet, kept my head down, acted confused like everyone else. But when the CEO called me into his office, I knew it was time. He smiled, not with warmth, but with respect. "You didn't have to do what you did," he said, "but I'm glad you did." Claire was dismissed, effective immediately. Her name vanished from the directory before lunch, and in that silence I finally exhaled. The weight that had been pressing on me for months lifted, replaced by a quiet satisfaction. I hadn't screamed, I hadn't fought. I'd simply exposed the truth. They offered me her position. I didn't celebrate. I just walked to the same break room, opened my lunchbox, and smiled at the absurd poetry of it all. One meal had changed everything. Power doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it whispers through patience, through silence, through knowing when to let the truth speak for itself. Claire had believed power was fear, the kind that made people small around her. But I learned that real power was presence, the kind that makes others stand taller beside you. When I walked through that office now, people met my eyes instead of lowering theirs. They knew what had happened, even if no one said it aloud. The system had turned on the one who'd abused it, and for once, justice didn't come from shouting. It came from clarity. I didn't destroy Claire. I simply revealed her reflection to the right people. The rest took care of itself. Now, whenever I sit down to lunch, I think about that day with the CEO, the simplest gesture, the quietest moment, that unraveled an empire built on arrogance. This is revenge untold, where silence isn't weakness, and truth always finds its way to the surface.